It's an honor to be asked to moderate this panel, Tailings Management for Responsible Mining, organized by the Mexico Mining Forum. Mining has been the center of my professional life for more than 20 years. I am very excited to be moderating this panel today. As environmental consultant in CTA, our team is faced with subjects related to the environment and social impact assessment, management plans, cyanide, and tailings management. I am going to introduce you our 4 panelists joining us here today. Brianna Gunn, Group Executive Environment for Newmont. Patricia Gonzalez, Plant Manager of Minera Cuscatlán. Chris Koutsaris, Sales Manager for Process Technology and Equipment at TACRAF. Sandrine Forsoni, Corporate Market Manager for Minerals at CEFAR. We have a great group of people here, and the subject of this panel is very relevant for the industry. It lies at the heart of every mining project in terms of cost, in terms of risk, and closure strategy. Tailings are also relevant because they are legacies with potential for acid generation and potential of structural failure. Tailings management has been in the news in recent years because of the dam failure at San Marco in 2015, similar situation at Brumadinho Dam in 2018, both in Brazil, and the recent launch of the global industry standard for tailings management by the ICMM, the International Council for Mining and Metals, in 2020. Brianna, I would like to start with you first. Please introduce yourself and your company and explain what best practices have enabled mining companies to optimize their tailings management and which trends will shape the future of tailings management. Please.
Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate it. And as he mentioned, my name is Brianna Gunn, and I am Group Executive of Newmont Mining. So just in general, I think I want to emphasize that although we are representing mining companies today, I can only really answer questions specific for Newmont, although I can provide some overview on what ICMM is doing in order to advance the practice of companies. So for us, we're in the process of making changes to our tailings management governance system in order to really fully implement the objectives of the global industry standard on tailings management. We believe this will set us apart from other companies in the industry. It's our belief that the GISTM really raises the bar for integrating social, environmental, economic, and technical considerations, elevating accountabilities, and really strengthening oversight and governance. As a member of ICMM, Newmont is committed to implementation of the GISTM, and we've already made a number of changes to be able to do that. I would say prior to the GISTM, many companies had robust standards in place for tailings management, including ourselves. But the GISTM really provides a level of consistency and attempts to raise the bar in how tailings are managed for all companies worldwide. It is really a critical step, we believe, in that direction. We understand the desire to have an independent organization to validate companies' compliance. We worked with ICMM's Tailings Working Group to support development of conformance protocols, which is also important to implementation of that. We really support having guidance out there for companies to be able to implement this. So in all ways, really, we believe that the industry really has to move forward more to safeguard lives in the environment in the design, operation, and closure of tailings facilities, and the GISTM is a great step in that direction.
Thank you, Brianna. Patricia, vamos contigo. ¿Podrías, por favor, introducirte?
Buenos días, mi nombre es Patricia González. Ocupo la gerencia de planta en compañía minera Cuscatlán, que es una filial de Fortuna Silver Mines. Nosotros iniciamos operaciones hace 10 años operando una empresa de jales convencional y con una planta pequeña produciendo 800 toneladas por día. Se fueron dando rápidamente las expansiones y fue cuando también se comenzó a ver la importancia de una mejor gestión de nuestros jales. A partir de las expansiones, ahora procesamos 3,000 toneladas por día y hemos migrado de operar una presa de jales a filtrar nuestros jales y tener un depósito de jales secos. Con este cambio hemos mejorado la gestión y nuestro manejo de aguas. Anteriormente, dado que nuestros jales tienen contenidos de carbonatos y arcillas, de forma natural retenían agua. Entonces esto nos iba a crear un proceso no sostenible. Afortunadamente, con nuestros cambios realizados en los procesos de ampliación, ahora tenemos una operación que recircula el 96% del agua utilizada en la planta de beneficio, y la poca cantidad que se pierde en la humedad de los jales la recuperamos con una planta de tratamiento de aguas residuales. Entonces yo creo que esta gestión de los jales también es el futuro de las compañías, el manejo del agua, gestionar los jales de la mejor manera, utilizar estándares globalizados a nivel mundial como el del ICMM, como el del MAC, etcétera, y trabajar en un aprovechamiento del agua y en evitar daños a las comunidades, al ambiente, y trabajar en conjunto con el ambiente en el cual estamos localizados.
Thank you, Patricia. Sandrini, for you, please introduce yourself, your company, and answer the previous question, please.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Sandrine Fossoni from CEFA. I'm working for CEFA for more than 15 years, and CEFA is a company specialized in the textile environment. So textile in the filtration, especially, it's needed for helping in this tailings management. It's a part of the tailings, and I think that we can participate to the needs of the tailing management. For sure, we can't do everything, but we can participate with our own level, so I could after show you some details. Just for introduce me again, I'm a textile engineer, and CEFA is developing the fabric for the tailings, especially in minerals. So I'm an expert in mineral and not in other type of things.
Thank you, Sandrine. I'm giving the word to Chris. Please introduce yourself, Chris, introduce your company, and if you can also answer the initial question, please go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrian. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm the sales manager for TACRAF. My region is North America. In particular, I focus on processing equipment. But just to give everyone a bit of information on my employer, TACRAF, they've been in business for over 100 years in the mining industry. They're based in Europe, and they started their business in coal mining way back when. Today, we're in mineral processing, that's for sure. On my end, working in the sales environment, I do get in contact with customers, and I do get a chance to discuss what potentially may be best practices for tailings management. And certainly what does get talked about a lot is stewardship reviews taking place by third-party engineers. So it's someone that's going to be, an entity that's independent of the review, as to not have any partial information. Of course, I'm also a firm believer in allowing operators on the field to take action, okay, as soon as a problem does arise. And you can do that is through preparation and through clear work instructions, okay? These must be available. Continuous training for implementing this would be necessary. Just typically some of the things I do hear about when I discuss with my customers, there's this need for impartiality, as well as making sure that the staff at site are extremely well prepared. And that takes planning, certainly, and it does create a cost for the company, but I believe it is one of the best ways moving forward.
Thank you, Chris. Again to Brianna, to the next question. How has tailing management evolved in recent years to minimize environmental and social risk throughout the life cycle of the mine and after mine closure, based on your experience at Newmont?
Thank you. So as you mentioned in the beginning, tailings governance has really significantly increased since the Mount Polley failure in August of 2014. really followed shortly thereafter by the failure of San Marcos Funchal Dam in Brazil in November 2015. And after that failure in Brazil, the Brumadinho failure in Brazil, which occurred in 2019, claiming the lives of nearly 300 people, there was really a call to action, which implemented with the culmination of the development of the global industry standard for tailings management. This includes companies really reviewing their policies, standards, disclosures around tailings, elevating their commitments, and the importance of management around risks around tailings dam. For Newmont, we specifically looked at how we evaluated tailings, what policies we had in place, and what guiding principles we had for really earning social acceptance. So we think it's important to build strong relationships and respect mutual success and commitment, act with humility and willingness to listen and be committed to constructively and transparently resolving differences and conflicts, seeking beneficial outcomes in our decision-making such that we contribute to sustainable development. In terms of policy, we've updated our sustainable and stakeholders engagement policy to make sure it's aligned with GISTM. Also, as noted, companies have looked at their standards and guidelines, and we've really done the same to make sure that we're effectively looking at environmental, social, and technical risks and opportunities in developing these. So in order to meet the requirements of the GISTM, we've really gone through, evaluated our standards, updated those, completed gap assessments against them, and provided work plans in order to be in compliance with the GISTM moving forward. Another piece that we've started to look through is evaluating risk. So we've been going through each of our existing tailings dams and updating our risk assessments using a multi-criteria analysis so we can really look at what are the different factors, as I said, technical, environmental, social, that are incorporated in the development of designing and managing tailings dams and make sure they're really incorporated in the methodologies that we have in place. We really believe that all portions of the life cycle of the mine need to consider those risks in the development. And that's really how we believe that things are moving forward in terms of advancing that integration. Thank you.
Brianna, to elaborate a little bit more on your answer, I understand that you conducted a gap assessment related to the global industry standard for tailings management by the ICMM. Could you please explain a little bit more about the gaps your company found when doing this analysis?
Definitely. So we have two standards that really relate back directly to the impacts of the GISTM, and those are the ones we did gap assessments against. And I'll just tell you what the major key gaps are that we found. One is really around knowledge base. So one of the things that the GISTM asks for is a compilation of all the information that you have developed around tailings dams. And while we have that, it wasn't in kind of a centralized database. So that was kind of a big area. Another area was on working towards safely closed. So while we had specific objectives identified for how we close facilities, it wasn't really working toward what the GISTM has defined as safely closed, which is a higher definition for technical and environmental requirements. I think the third was really around how closely we are working on our emergency response plans in consideration with stakeholders. So making sure that we're really aligning and people understand what their role in emergency management is, both internally and externally. So we have a little bit of work to do there. And I think the final one was really making sure that we have integrated management systems for technical, social, and environmental aspects. So those were the major gaps that we identified that we're really working toward in order to be in compliance. The other pieces that we've done a lot of work on already were really on the governance and management approach when we were moving forward with the GISTM.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. Yendo hacia ti, Patricia, ¿cómo ha evolucionado la gestión de los jales en los últimos años en tu operación para minimizar los riesgos ambientales y sociales a través del ciclo de vida de la mina y pensando en el cierre?
Pues sí, en Fortuna Silver también hemos evolucionado de un manejo en particular en las unidades mineras, a que Fortuna también ya tiene sus estándares de gestión enfocados a los cumplimientos internacionales de los estándares que surgieron en los últimos años. Pues actualmente nuestras operaciones están regidas por el estándar Fortuna que está alineado actualmente estamos alineándonos con el estándar MAC. Bueno, esto nos ha llevado a fortalecer los temas de gobernanza, sobre todo, crear un involucramiento multidisciplinario en la operación de los depósitos mineros. Creo que antiguamente la operación y el manejo de los depósitos se dejaba al área operativa y quizás a medio ambiente, y con esta nueva gestión pues involucras prácticamente todas las áreas de la compañía hasta en el más mínimo detalle. Creo que este fortalecimiento te lleva a mejorar la gestión y obviamente a dar confianza de que estás operando de la mejor manera posible, ¿no? Creo que también la mayoría de las minas vamos hacia esa línea del cumplimiento de los estándares internacionales porque nos están creando un idioma común para trabajar.
Patricia, tú mencionaste que Fortuna Silver está alineada con los protocolos de la Mining Association of Canada.
Actualmente estamos trabajando con esa alineación. Aún no se tiene la postura de comenzar el cumplimiento del estándar de ICMM, pero trabajamos con el Mining Association of Canada.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Moving to Sandrine, just to mention your mute, please, if you can answer that question, also from your perspective of mining provider.
On the tailings management, the filtration can have a really optimum and safe impact. For sure, the filtration is a crucial step in the tailing management, and we know how the risk is high today with a huge amount of tailings. The filtration now, it's a big part, like Takraf and Chris will certainly explain, that we can have a positive and real impact on these questions. So it's really a part we really work on it today. We really focus on the part of the safe for the environment, for the people. We work only with this in mind, clearly.
Okay, thank you, Sandrine. The same to you, Chris. Please go ahead.
Sure. My comments parallel a little bit Brianna's in the sense that stakeholders are very important, okay? Not that I believe that stakeholders were less important in the past, but I believe that the degree of accommodation which we give Indigenous peoples today is a lot better. The accommodations are a lot better than they once were in the past. And this is different, and it's changing and it's improving. In fact, it's become an integral part of permitting any plant today or any mining project, okay? And I see that trend in my region. I'm based in Canada. This certainly is a key component to any mining project. I imagine the same thing would be happening with the Indigenous peoples in South America. And this is what I see changing the most, and it's a trend which will not change and only grow in importance as we move on in the future.
Okay, stakeholders engagement, important issue. We're going to discuss that later on. So moving to the next question to Brianna, in the perspective of Newmont and operating several mines around the world, what are the most effective technologies that are being incorporated in tailings management, and what is their added value?
So I'm going to concentrate on something that's important to us, as opposed to talking about some of the stuff I think that that Chris will provide more information on in terms of technology. But one thing that's really important for us is increased monitoring systems. So increased monitoring systems to understand really how well our dams are performing from a geotechnical standpoint. So we've really been looking at improving visual monitoring. So looking at drones, automated systems for instrumentation, that are connected to dashboards that we can look at multiple levels across the organization. This really is helping us to get visibility on the critical areas of our dams that we think are really important to make sure we're maintaining safe facilities. Additionally, obviously, there's technologies that are used to advance reduction of tailings that are actually being produced. So we have some consortiums that we work on that are helping support just having less waste come out of the development of a mine, which also includes reduction of tailings. We're also looking at ways to reduce water through commingling, filtering, off-pond storage, and methods of reducing overall footprint. We think all of those are really important things that are needed as we develop tailings in the future. As I said, really understanding performance for what we have in place, but then really reducing that footprint that exists from the tailings facility and those modes of potential failure that could happen from water or other sources. So those are really the areas that we're concentrating in terms of technology.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. And in terms of monitoring systems for tailings dams is probably what you are referring to. Is like a real system in real time, or is more just like a review of data in an annual basis? How does it work?
Yeah, so historically we've done more of a review based, but we are converting over to a real-time system. So in terms of our piezometers, inclinometers, looking at movement of the dams, we're using, like I said, we're using drones, we're using online database systems to really understand what's happening with water levels and movement of our facilities, and connecting that into a dashboard that also links to what we believe are critical controls for managing the stability of the dam. And that's something that we can look at on a regular basis. So we're progressing toward advancing that at the majority of our facilities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. What about, ¿qué piensas de eso, Patricia, en términos de la mina en la mina minera Cuscatlán? ¿Cómo ves cuáles son las tecnologías más efectivas que se han incorporado en la gestión de colas, de relaves?
Definitivamente la más importante hasta ahora fue filtrar los jales. El haber migrado de operar una presa de jales convencional a filtrado, bueno, de entrada nos permite recircular la mayor cantidad de agua del proceso y utilizarla inmediatamente. De tener una recirculación del 96% del agua, definitivamente te convierte en una operación que no depende de otras fuentes para operar y conseguir agua, ¿no? Entonces, de entrada, esa es la principal de nosotros. Obviamente, todo esto se apoya de las tecnologías mencionadas por Brianna, que es la instrumentación en los depósitos, los piezómetros, los acelerógrafos. Nosotros estamos localizados en una zona sísmica. Por lo tanto, también el monitoreo de los taludes de ambos depósitos es muy importante. Actualmente también ahorita hacemos una revisión de registro, pero sabemos que también ya esto lo podemos tener en modo real y pues vamos a apuntar hacia irnos al monitoreo en tiempo real. También el monitoreo con los drones. Entonces, pues todo esto te lleva a fortalecer la vigilancia y el seguimiento de los depósitos, pero de entrada para Cuscatlán el filtrar sus jales y adicional el buscar alternativas para el uso de jales como el relleno de mina, pues te está disminuyendo la mancha de generación de jales.
Patricia, la mina que ustedes operan en México es una mina subterránea.
Es una mina subterránea, así es. Tiene la bondad de que la matriz es de sílice, carbonato, arcilla, entonces no es generadora de ácido ni de lixidia metales. Entonces, eso también te da la facilidad de utilizar los jales en otras situaciones y no tener un tema de drenaje ácido, ¿no? Entonces, aprovechamos esa bondad de buscar alternativas para reusar el jale.
Okay, gracias, Patricia. Going to you, Chris, from the perspective of a provider, what are the most effective technologies that are being incorporated in tailings management? And what is the value that you think it adds to the industry and to the operators?
Certainly. Of course, Brianna just mentioned there is a certain amount of technology needed for surveillance and monitoring. And that's important. on my end, I certainly look at things from the processing point of view. So not all tailings are alike. I mean, certain mines will go after the same metal, but the ore body will not be the same. So there's no magic bullet, or rather silver bullet, you know, for say managing all tailings projects around the world. Typically, the way we would approach it, or how I would approach it, being a process engineer myself, is the same way you would develop a flow sheet for your processing plant. It's the same process you would use for developing a tailings treatment system. Okay. Now, that of course includes test work, and of course, you know, typically what we would like to do for a customer is get rid of a tailings pond altogether. If you tailings pond whatsoever, then there's no risk of breach or failure, and there's no catastrophe to happen. So typically, what we would like to do is to eliminate the tailings pond altogether. How we can achieve that? Well, there is a myriad of technologies you can use. Standard, easy way approach is, of course, using filter presses. And then once you've dewatered your material and you've recovered as much water as you possibly can, well, then there's a balance you need to make on this material. Typically, what we'd like to do is to stack it, okay, into various shapes. Either we can move the material to fill in vacant spaces created through mining activities, or we can stack the material such that this material is not stored in a tailings pond, and furthermore can be reclaimed for further processing at a later date. So and of course, we do see in the industry today how filter presses themselves are becoming infinitely large, okay? And again, I'd like to tell everybody that I don't think the solution is making things infinitely large or finding one single solution for every single tailings project in the world. Every single plant has a different ore body, a different process. You must analyze those tailings accordingly. And yeah, like I mentioned before, simple filter press and dry stacking can be an option. In other situations, you could be filtering to a lower degree of moisture, okay, in order to optimize on costs. Perhaps even your facility can tolerate such that it doesn't need to recover the maximum amount of water needed from tailings. So, so essentially, the aim is to get rid of the tailings pond. The route to get there, okay, could be multiple. Engineering is necessary to get there. And that's the approach we take, at least TACRAF themselves and myself as well. This is the approach we take. I tell people there's no magic bullet. And as well, to keep in mind that this pursuit of equipment becoming infinitely big, okay, infinitely big filter presses, horizontal belt filters, infinitely big thickeners, etc. I don't think that's the way of the future. Okay, certainly it will accommodate bigger mines. As grades get worse, we need to mine more rock, and so making equipment bigger, that won't change. But we need to start looking at developing new technologies. Okay, very often mining companies will ask the technology providers to assume the cost of inventing something new to solve customers' problems, okay? And asking technology companies to assume all the risk is, I don't think either, the best way forward, okay? And I do actively have conversations with customers, clients, etc., on how we work together in developing solutions, okay? And I think that's the right way to move forward on this. It's a collaborative effort where we need to innovate and at sometimes maybe even create things that didn't exist before. And so this is where I see technology having the largest impact in tailings management.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. What is your opinion about a tailing segregation based on their grain size, fine and coarse, and or the potential of acid generation? What is your opinion about this type of segregation, Chris?
So certainly separating tailings by size is, from my point of view, it's a processing decision, okay? if I can selectively sort out the coarse material, okay, with a less expensive technology, and then have the fines treated, okay, with smaller equipment downstream, that's when start looking, separating coarse and fines is very valuable. So to give a concrete example on that, okay, very standard flow sheet would be hydrocycloning, okay, where we can cut the coarse from the fines. Typically fines, because they're hard to dewater, you would need to apply pressure filtration on them to dewater them, okay? Crystal clear example is using a Delcor filter press, using Cephar filter media to achieve that process, okay? But typically that's how you would deal with fine material. And the coarser material could be done with typical, very simple vacuum filtration. To a certain degree, depending on what your process can tolerate, you can simply thicken them. You know, it's all dependent on what the customer's needs are, etc. So segregating on size alone, okay, will save a customer money, certainly. But the engineering has to be done in order to evaluate that. The second part of your question, which was size and
acid potential generation.
Absolutely, and this is extremely critical. Okay, so I mentioned before using dry stacking. Okay, that probably wouldn't be the best option in an extremely rainy environment. Of course, you can have leaching of the pile into your soil, and so of course additional engineering is needed to prevent that from happening as well. But you know, in the current existing state of tailings ponds, okay, given that they're lined, okay, with impermeable material, okay, the risk of acid leaching, okay, is much lower at that point, okay, because I have installed a protective barrier. And unless someone disturbs that barrier, that's the only time I'd get a risk of actual acid penetrating the soil, affecting drinking water, etc. So certainly, like I said before, there's no silver bullet, okay? There's no one technology that can be applied in all geographies for all plants. So certainly acid generation is extremely important, okay, for protecting our environment. We want to limit that. And, you know, without, you know, tailings ponds is one way of dealing with that. I can put, you know, exothermic minerals underwater and keep them from fire, etc. These are all ideas that we currently put in practice today. But certainly, moving forward, we would like to look at neutralizing the tailings as to make them completely neutral to the environment, protecting not only people, but animals and fauna, etc. And so this is the approach I see taking moving forward with regards to, you know, acid leaching into our soils.
Thank you, Chris. If I can go back to Brianna and ask a similar question about how do you manage tailings with acid potential and non-acid potential tailings in your tailings dams? Is there any specific strategy implemented by Newmont differentiating this type of tailings, Brian?
I don't know if it's unique, but we spend a lot of time in the beginning of development of a project trying to do geochemistry to really understand if there is acid generating potential. And then we have some different methodologies in terms of what we're doing to segregate waste to reduce the amount that actually is potentially impacted. On the tailings dams, we would tend to try to encapsulate the areas so that we're not basically using ARD generated rock for the construction and development of the dam to reduce that. You know, if we do have rock that is in that way, we identify methods to try to reduce and mitigate that, which in some cases is looking at seepage management or return of the water or treatment systems that are in place. So we really try to understand what the potential there is and work on that in terms of linking our water balances with the geochemistry to make sure that we have the right systems in place to monitor and manage that over time.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. Patricia, ¿puedo regresar contigo al tema de las colas filtradas, de los jales filtrados y preguntarte si ves alguna diferencia en separar los jales por el tamaño del grano, finos, gruesos? ¿Te hace sentido hacer eso en tu operación?
En particular, en nuestra operación no es tan factible porque tenemos una molienda bien fina. Entonces, la generación de gruesos es mínima. En un principio lo trabajamos para que los gruesos sirvieran para el relleno en pasta de lámina, pero nuestro material es muy fino. Entonces, el porcentaje que le íbamos a retirar es mínimo. Y ya teniendo una operación con dry stack, la estabilidad que le da la mezcla de todas las granulometrías en la compactación del depósito, pues es clave que tenga toda la granulometría completa. Entonces, al nosotros ahorita estar buscando alternativas de reuso, no es separando los tamaños, sino utilizándolo tal cual está, que ya por sí es un material bastante fino.
Okay, thank you. Gracias, Patricia. Moving to the next question is related to water management. Water is very important in every mining operation. There are jurisdictions where the water is abundant and others where the water is scarce. So how are the tailing systems contributing to water management, and how much water savings and recycling do they provide? Can we start with you, Brian, on that?
Sure, we can start with me on that question. So we have a mix of different types of tailings at our facilities, but for conventional slurry, which we would say is solids of less than about 50%, there's a lot of water that's either stored, entrained, lost due to foundation or evaporation lost in the impoundment. So really identifying ways to increase solids to reduce the water losses in the facilities is the way that we look at the potential for savings and water conservation in terms of tailing. So we can also increase recycling rates from the reclaim ponds, making sure that we're prioritizing using water from there over, bringing in fresh water for makeup. That reduces the water impact from other systems. We're also working collaboratively in terms of our integrated water balances to really understand where water is coming from, how much is needed at different areas of the mine, how much can we bring back, and looking at ways that we can identify opportunities to support efficiencies. In terms of the value they provide, Newmont has on an annual basis set up water accounting, so we can take a look at how much water consumption we have across the area. And we've looked at identifying water targets to support reduction in consumption. So on a year-over-year basis, we're looking at reducing consumption by around 5%, with a greater than that reduction in areas that are water stressed, as you pointed out. And right now, we have increased recycle rates, reduced intensity targets that are leading to that. On average, we're recycling about 70% of our water. So that's how it's providing value back to us, but we continue to try to look for methodologies where we can just reduce the amount of water that is sitting on the tailings, because that is a huge loss in terms of the circuit.
Yeah, that's probably especially true in areas where the rate of evaporations are high, like Zacatecas, but probably compared to other jurisdictions where the evaporation rate is low, probably less relevant, right?
Definitely. So we have to balance. We have sites that have excess water, not our site in Mexico that has not as much water. So at the sites like that, we've tried to really look at ways to reduce evaporation, like taking the reclaim pond off of the tailings facility into a centralized area where there's less potential for evaporation and loss from that. So there are different ways that we look at based on the type of system and environment that we're in.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And moving to Sandrine, the same question: how are tailing systems contributing to water management? And from the provider perspective, Sandrine?
Okay, so I would start first by, as it's already said, that all the tailings are same minerals but different, and each case it's different. But if you understand correctly the tailings and you know the rules behind the filtrations, you will know that we have some rules to play. I would start just to inform the audience that in filtration, we can remove the water, a part of the water. We try to, with the the manufacturers, the machine manufacturers, we try always to recycle this water, which is a good starting to not waste the water. But each cake has its own cake dryness limit. This dryness limit is depending of the type of slurry, and to eliminate this liquid, we need some dehydration first on the machinery. Like we say for filter press, we have some options like the membrane or like the hair blowing. This is a part of the machine who can impact really the dewatering. This has to be defined by the manufacturer of the machine, and it's really depend of the type of slurry. Sometimes, just for information, sometimes the cake blowing has absolutely no effect, when the membrane has a big effect, and the inverse, depend really of the slurry. What is interesting is when you have the concept, you have made the test, you see what is possible, for sure you arrive to the fabric. And only with the fabric, I would say, it's not only, but we could say only with the fabric, we can see, and we have already seen, that we can impact from 1 to 5% of residual moisture. When I take just an average of an improvement of 3% with of the cake, of the moisture in the cake on the average filter press, it will represent between 1,000 and 1,500 cubic meter per day. So, and this is a small part. So for sure, the tailing management need to take into account all these different steps. As I said, the machine manufacturer can impact a lot the cake moisture. It can impact from 10% the cake moisture, and if with the fabric, you can also implement 5% more. And when I told you 3% is minimum 1,000 cubic meter per day, imagine if you combine the filter machine with the fabric, and you could have a real save of the water.
Thank you, Sandrine. Probably, I would like to ask this question to both of you, Sandrine and Chris, from the service provider or technology side of this problem. I understand that most of the equipment used for filtration of tailings works at the batch. Are you also developing or have a equipment that works in a continuous way in a Chris?
So yes, absolutely. Filter presses operate in batches, okay? They must be loaded, and then so essentially a filter press is pressurized slurry being fed into small enclosures within the machine. And as Sandrine properly pointed out, you can have air blowing to squeeze out additional water from it. Okay. Yeah. Or a membrane, which itself inflates to push against the filter cake to squeeze out even more water. And so that's specifically how that particular technology works in batches, okay? And we would like to use those with the finest material possible, hard to find material. But on the continuous point, we do supply, at least our Delcor brand of equipment does supply a horizontal belt filter. Now, this isn't pressure filtration, this is vacuum filtration, okay? So the applied pressure to dewater is a lot lower, but it does operate continuously, okay? And this does work best to achieve the levels of moisture you would get from a filter press. To achieve that, you would need coarser tailings to get there with a horizontal belt filter, which operates continuously. So, you know, if the plan were to say we wanted to have this continuous, first of all, recovery of water and processing, okay? And we choose technologies to get there. Immediately, we would need to make changes to the actual processing plant itself, okay? To ensure that the tailings meets a certain spec for that equipment to be used, okay? But iterative type of solution, okay? will also have a gigantic impact on the profitability of a project, okay? So the holistic thinking about how we want to approach the problem should start at the very beginning, okay? Equipment doesn't work unless the feed meets a certain spec for the equipment to work on that feed material properly. So this is something that needs to be present in our mind as well. But just to summarize my comments, yes, continuous technologies do exist. Horizontal belt filters are one, pan filters are another. Centrifuging is also a continuous type of dewatering, etc.
Yeah.
So, so these technologies do exist, but they work better on coarser materials for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, what I would like to add, it's yes, we know also a lot of equipment. We spoke about pan filters, belt filters. We can ask also rotary disc filters because we see a lot of rotary disc filters in mining industries. But you have really to consider the equipment since the beginning of the project, like Brian has said also, that you have to integrate that. There is two aspects in the machine shows. There is first investment, for sure, and after, in terms of result, what you are waiting for. And for sure, a belt filter has not the same results in terms of moisture than a filter press. And you have to consider what you want really with your equipment, what you want to achieve, what is your investment in comparison. And the last important point, the volume you have to treat. Because today we are able to, so not me, but the market is able to provide big filter press to manage volume of tailings. Honestly, yes, it's by batch, but it's a huge volume when for belt filter, the equivalence will need many more belt filters. So you have really to consider the global view and not to focus on batch or continuous, but really what is the target and what is the investments you are able to provide. We go back to the stockholder also.
Okay, thank you, Sandrine. Again, an additional question to you both. I understand that many or several mining companies see the filter tailings as an additional capex expenditure at the initial of the project development. And so this is why they probably avoid from the beginning the use of filter tailings. Is there another consideration you think that the mining companies take into consideration to go with tailings dams?
I'm sorry, Julian, is your question, is there an alternative to filtering?
No, if the mining companies have another factor beside cost in their decision to choose wet tailings instead of filter tailings.
Sandrine, I'll just start. Unfortunately, cost is extremely important, okay? To use the old expression, money talks, right?
Money talks, yeah.
Money talks. So, of course, shareholders of companies, you know, are very closely monitoring profitability of businesses, etc. And if that cost doesn't need to be incurred due to some kind of government regulation, then why incur it? Okay. Now, just like cities hire garbage men to collect waste off our streets so we can live in a clean environment, you know, we need to start developing a culture like that at the very least, okay? Now, I'm not saying that literal garbage men are needed to collect tailings, but what I'm trying to say is that, you know, cleaning up after our own waste shouldn't be seen as a type of cost, okay? Neither should it be seen as a risk. You know, it's just cleaning up after myself to live and work within a clean environment. Now, going back to what I originally said, yes, cost is extremely important, okay? But certainly what needs to change is culture, okay? And of course, that cannot come from the employees themselves. It's got to come from the investment community, okay? Who are going to start demanding that mining companies become, say, better stewards of the environment, etc. certainly, I think that would help move things along, certainly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
just, yes,
you're right. Yes, Andrea.
what I would like, it's for sure it's costly, and unfortunately it's a cost for managing the waste. It's not for the process. So nobody want to pay for the waste. Finally, it's just an overcost. So this is it's a part of the issue. If we just go back a little bit with the previous questions, when you say what could be the future and so on. For example, regarding the acid water inside, we know and Chris know that the filter press, for example, is able to wash the cake and really to remove a lot of acid in it. Sorry, to have quite a neutral water after or neutral cake even. The problem is it's a water consumption, an additional water consumption. It's an additional time. You need more filter presses, and it's only a question of of cost. So if we don't have the investment and the government who go in to say, go in and push for the environment, really, this cost is not considered for the moment. But it's some things possible for the future, really, to have a neutral cake, to have quite a very low humidity in the cake, a good disposal. This is already somewhere possible, but not yet used, or not as much.
Thank you, Sandrine. We have a question from the audience for you, Sandrine. And the question is, what level of importance do filtered textiles have on tailings process?
So I think I have answered a little bit already. There is 2 points, or 3, I would say. First, again, it's like the waste. The fabric is just an accessory, a third party, so it's costly. So the interest of the fabric is to be the more efficient with the low cost. The more efficient means a very good filtrate properties. This is done by the fabric. The machine will give us the opportunity to put the fabric, and the fabric will make the filtration. So the level of the clarity is done by the fabric. So it's very important. In the same time, the cake moisture is impacted also by the fabric. So if you want to reduce your cake moisture, the fabric is a way, because in general, when you arrive to this stage, the machine is already defined. If the machine is not defined, for sure, it's a machine manufacturer who will have the more impact on that. But when the machine is already defined, the fabric has a real impact. As I say, I have samples where with the same fabric, 2-3 different weave patterns, we have a change only on the cake moisture from 1 to 5% difference. So for sure, this is really important. After, we have also a small impact, and I say small, but for me, very important for the operators on the plant, because less you change the cloth, better is for the process and better is also for operators. When we spoke about automatic machine, the important is also to have a good cake release. Again, it's a fabric which could give this cake release correct, and to have no always operators who go to help the cake to go down. So it's small things, but globally it makes a big change when you have the good fabrics.
Yeah, there may be also an issue, Chris and Sandrine, about the time needed to acquire a filtration unit when you are designing and building a mining and process plant versus building a dam. Could be that an issue, the queue and lines on the producer sides that moves the decision to tailings dam? Chris?
I don't think equipment delivery has an impact on that.
Okay.
Frankly, even if a large supply took a year to manufacture, okay, I still think I'm not an expert, but I would imagine it would take less time than digging a tailings pond needed for, say, 50 million tons of tailings, okay? Now, never have I encountered a situation where timing of equipment delivery had an impact on how we're going to deal with our tailings. Just to repeat what I mentioned before, you know, it comes down to CapEx, like you pointed out, okay?
Yeah.
Cost is key here, okay? Very often, just to add, I am asked, okay, if we can not only recover water, okay, but recover value from the tailings, okay? Can we repurpose them in some way? Can we transform it in some way? Such that I've been asked, I won't name names of companies in order to protect privacy, but you know, a lot of large mining companies actually want to transform tailings into something profitable, okay? Now, I think that for certain, certain ores that were rich to begin with, okay? Certain ores potentially could be repurposed, okay? Either as concentrate to a new plant or repurposed for some structural purposes later. And this is currently very popular, and many technology providers are being asked to innovate and think about these problems. But like I mentioned earlier, also the expectation from mining companies that, you know, equipment suppliers are going to assume all the cost for inventing and innovating for how do we, you know, make tailings valuable, okay? So that's a challenge as well, and it all comes back down to costs again. And
okay.
So really, you know, if we want to, so of course it comes down to changing culture. Like I mentioned before, that's one thing that needs to change. But to answer your question, no, large supply delivery has never impacted, at least I've never seen it impact the decision of choosing a tailings pond or not.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Good answer.
Yeah,
yes,
just I think that Brianna can confirm, but just to confirm what Chris said, it's always a big project to manage the tailings. It's not only one filter. And 1 year inside the project is nothing. The more important is really to think correctly about the project at the beginning. If you really want to manage your tailings in 1 year, I'm not sure that you think on all the parameters you need. So you need really to take first the time to think about where you will dispose your waste, how you will manage the transport, what is the cake moisture you expect, and so on and so on. This needs a lot of analyze, needs a lot of imagination, innovation, and it's not the 1 year provided by the machine manufacturer which really make the difference.
Thank you, Sandrine. Patricia, ya estamos acabándonos con el tiempo. We are running out of time. We have less than 2 minutes now. Solo quería decirte, preguntarte a ti, Patricia, ¿qué piensas que debería pasar en México en cuanto a legislación o regulación para aprovechar, digamos, o usar las mejores prácticas en el manejo de jales?
Pues precisamente eso, creo que el gobierno tiene que voltear a ver lo que está surgiendo en cuanto a estándares a nivel internacional y empezar a trabajar en actualizar las leyes que actualmente tenemos. Nosotros operamos un dry stack y dentro de la normatividad mexicana está bastante vago el tema de los depósitos de jales secos. Entonces creo que sí deberían voltear a ver los estándares internacionales y tomar las mejores prácticas para asegurar las operaciones en México.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Gracias, Patricia. So I think we are running out of time. We want to thank you, all of you, for your providing and sharing your expertise and knowledge on tailings management. I think the information we have received is really outstanding, coming from mining companies and coming from the industry technology providers. Thank you to you all. Thanks to the audience, and see you next time.